June 1945. A senior officer prisoner of war compound sits near Garmisch-Partenkirchen, Germany. The mountain air is clear, and the captured men inside the wire are well fed. One man decides he has a story to tell. Generaloberst Manfred von Helldorff sits at a wooden table, writing. He wants a bilingual stenographer. He wants 3 hours of dictation time every single day. He wants maps, historical documents, and weekly meetings with professional historians. He intends to dictate his war memoirs. He wants to explain how his Panzer divisions were never truly beaten, how Adolf Hitler betrayed him, and how only American factory production saved the Allies. He believes the world is waiting for his book. He is about to find out exactly what General George Patton thinks of his authorial ambitions. This is the story of a defeated Panzer general who tried to rewrite history from a prison camp, only to meet a commander who specialized in crushing illusions. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe. We tell the World War II stories that show what happened when the loser still thinks he is the master. Colonel Robert Whitmore was 47 years old. He came from Buffalo, New York. Before the war, he practiced law, analyzing fine print and dissecting human vanity. Now, he was the commandant of a compound housing, the wreckage of the German High Command. For 2 months, Whitmore had watched defeated commanders arrive with polished boots and intact egos. 11 of them had already asked for writing materials to draft their memoirs. Whitmore denied them all without a second thought. He was a professional man, even-handed and calm, but he had zero patience for self-mythologizing. He looked at the war not as a grand literary stage, but as a crime scene that needed clearing. On this June morning, he held a new request from his most prestigious prisoner, and he knew his patience had finally run out. Generaloberst Manfred von Helldorff was 56 years old. He came from Pomerania, a region built on military tradition and aristocratic pride. He had been a career officer since 1908, serving as a young lieutenant in the First World War before moving steadily up the ranks of the Reichswehr and the Wehrmacht. He had commanded Panzer divisions in the mud of Russia, the fields of France, and the final chaotic defense of the German homeland. 2 Knights' Crosses hung around his neck. His uniform was tailored, his boots shone, and he carried himself like a historical figure temporarily inconvenienced by captivity. For 3 weeks, he had used borrowed paper to outline a massive manuscript. In his mind, his hands were clean. The atrocities were the work of fanatics, not his proud panzers. He truly believed posterity would vindicate him if he could just write the first draft. He was anchored to this single, stubborn delusion when he handed his demands to the camp guards. The European war was over, but the war for the historical narrative was just beginning. Across occupied Germany in the summer of 1945, hundreds of high-ranking Wehrmacht officers were settling into Allied prison camps. The guns were silent, the cities were in ruins, and the scale of the regime's crimes was coming to light. Yet, inside the wire, a strange phenomenon was taking root. Dozens of generals were requesting paper, ink, and desks. They were not writing confessions. They were writing justifications. They wanted to build a myth of a clean German army that was simply overwhelmed by numbers. This situation was possible because of the sheer scale of the post-war chaos. Millions of displaced persons clogged the roads, supply lines were stretched across continents, and the Allied administration was overwhelmed with the logistics of occupation. In the confusion, many camp commanders let things slide. Some officers allowed the captive generals to maintain their batmen, their separate dining rooms, and their dignity. It was easier to keep the peace by letting them write their diaries. But the compound near Garmisch-Partenkirchen was different. Colonel Whitmore saw the danger of letting the defeated rewrite the past. He looked at von Helldorff's detailed outline, tucked the file under his arm, and sent it up the chain of command. The paperwork moved fast. The zoom-in was about to resume. Colonel Whitmore did not summon the general to his office. Instead, he walked down to the prisoner barracks, accompanied by Master Sergeant Anna Kaczynski, a 33-year-old supply specialist from Detroit, Michigan. They found von Helldorff sitting on his cot, using a wooden crate as a desk, his fountain pen moving across a fresh sheet of paper. Whitmore's stood in the doorway and spoke clearly. "General, I have reviewed your request for a bilingual stenographer and a private research room." Von Helldorff did not stand up immediately. He finished his sentence, placed the pen down carefully, and then rose to face the colonel. "Excellent," the general said. "When can the clerk report for duty?" I have 3 chapters outlined, and my memory is quite sharp regarding the encirclement at Vitebsk. Your request is denied, General, Whitmore said. Von Helldorff blinked, his aristocratic composure cracking slightly. Denied? On what grounds, Colonel? This is not a personal favor. This is for the historical record of the European theater. The world must understand the strategic movements of the Panzer Corps. The world does not need your strategic movements, General, Whitmore replied. My orders are to maintain this camp, not to publish your memoirs. This is a violation of my status, von Helldorff said, his voice rising, stiff with Pomeranian pride. I am a Generaloberst of the German army. I am a professional soldier, not a common criminal. Our defeat was a matter of material, of American factories and Russian winter. It was not a failure of our military science. The historical truth belongs to the men who fought the battles, not just the politicians who signed the treaties. Whitmore looked at the papers on the crate, then back at the general. Your science left Europe in ashes, General. I am not providing you with a staff. Then you are suppressing history. Von Helldorff snapped, stepping forward. You are afraid of the truth. If the German High Command is not permitted to speak, then the narrative will be written by amateurs. I demand to speak with someone who understands military honor. I will not be silenced by a camp commandant. Whitmore did not argue. He turned to Kozinski, pack up his outline and attach it to the daily log. Kozinski stepped forward and picked up the loose pages from the crate. Von Helldorff watched her, his face flushing red, but he did not move to stop her. Whitmore walked out of the barracks and returned to his administrative office. He placed the memoir outline and the general's formal request inside a leather courier pouch. He addressed it directly to 3rd Army Headquarters. The report reached Patton within the hour. Patton arrived within the hour. His jeep roared through the compound gates, kicking up a cloud of gray dust that settled over the wire. 4 polished stars flashed on his helmet, and the ivory handles of his revolvers caught the midday sun as he stepped out. Everyone in the barracks room registered his presence. The captive officers straightened their backs, and the room fell completely silent. Patton walked in unannounced, his boots striking the wooden floorboards with a heavy, rhythmic cadence. He did not raise his voice. He did not look angry. He looked entirely cold. The general stopped 3 feet from von Helldorff and studied him. You are the officer who requires a secretary, Patton said. Von Helldorff stood at attention, trying to match the American general's posture. I requested a stenographer to record my memoirs, General, he said. You believe your thoughts on the war are essential, Patton said. They are necessary for a complete understanding of the Eastern Front, von Helldorff answered. And you believe your panzers were never truly beaten by tactical skill, Patton asked, his voice narrowing. We were overwhelmed by numbers and material, von Helldorff said. The military honor of the Wehrmacht remains intact. Patton looked at the German's immaculate uniform, then at the polished boots. You think you are a schoolmaster, and this camp is your classroom, Patton said. You think you can lose a continent, kill millions of people, and then spend your afternoons dictating a book about how it wasn't your fault. You are mistaken, General. The world does not owe you a desk, and it does not owe you a hearing. Your war is over, and your privilege ended the day you signed the surrender. You have a choice, Patton continued, his voice dropping an octave. You will work, or you will starve. If you want an assignment commensurate with your current standing in this world, I have found one for you. You will maintain the cleanliness of these senior officer barracks, you will sweep the floors, you will scrub the latrines, and you will empty the trash of the 60 men you used to command. You may choose this duty, or you may choose a solitary cell in the general population with subsistence rations. Decide now. Von Helldorff stared at Patton, his mouth opening slightly, his Pomeranian pride completely shattered by the blunt choice. He looked down at the floor, then back at the 4 stars on Patton's helmet. He said nothing. He simply bowed his head. The verdict was carried out the following morning at precisely 6 o'clock. Master Sergeant Kosinski walked into the senior officer barracks carrying a wooden bucket, a stiff bristled broom and a gray mop. She dropped them at the feet of Generaloberst von Helldorff. 60 captured German generals and colonels stood along the walls, watching in absolute silence as their former corps commander looked down at the cleaning tools. Von Helldorff's hands shook as he picked up the broom. He had not held a cleaning implement in 35 years. For 12 hours every day, The compound smelled of strong lye soap and dirty water. The general swept the floorboards, scrubbed the latrine buckets, and emptied the heavy copper ashtrays of his subordinate officers. The men he used to lead looked away when he passed them with the mop. They could hear the scrape of his broom against the wood from morning until night. There was no dignity left in the barracks, only the smell of bleach and the sight of a Panzer leader on his knees, wiping mud from the floorboards. He was a public spectacle, a living reminder that the old hierarchy was completely dead. Generaloberst von Helldorff performed his janitorial duties for 6 weeks. Every evening at 1800 hours, he submitted a brief, written statement to the camp office, noting that the floors were swept and the latrines were maintained. On the 7th week, he submitted a different note, requesting a permanent transfer to the general prisoner population, so he would no longer have to clean the quarters of his former subordinates. Colonel Whitmore approved the transfer immediately. Von Helldorff spent the remainder of his captivity in anonymity, his hands calloused and his fountain pen put away. He was released from captivity in 1948 and returned to a ruined, divided Germany. He found work as a quiet bookkeeper for a shipping firm in Hamburg, living in a small, third-floor apartment with no military decorations on his walls. He died in 1971. Years later, his son found the original, handwritten memoir outline inside an old trunk and threw it into the trash, leaving no written record of the general's war. Colonel Whitmore returned to Buffalo, New York, after the occupation ended, resuming his law practice and never speaking of the generals he guarded. Draster Sergeant Anna Kozinski returned to her family in Detroit, keeping only a small logbook from the camp as a reminder of her service. General George Patton never mentioned the incident in his public briefings or his personal memoirs. He simply kept the original request file inside his desk drawer until his death. On the margin of the final report, he had scrawled a single line in blue ink, noting that the first draft of history is rarely written by the defeated, and we do them a favor by not letting them try. Some historians have argued that the suppression of Wehrmacht memoirs in the immediate post-war period was a missed opportunity to gather critical tactical intelligence and understand the operational mindset of the German High Command. Others have argued the opposite, maintaining that allowing defeated commanders to publish uncorrected justifications would have solidified the dangerous myth of the clean Wehrmacht and distorted the historical record for generations. What is certain is that the physical labor imposed on the captive officers permanently broke the illusion of their unearned privilege. If you had been in Patton's position, would you have done the same? Or would you have allowed the general to write his book under guard? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more stories about when the loser still thinks he is the master, make sure to subscribe.